Situated approximately 23 miles north of Cardiff, lies the town of Merthyr Tydfil. Located in its own borough, it was once the largest town in Wales, and with the arrival of the Industrial Revolution, Merthyr's claim to fame would rapidly increase. In 1804, Richard Trevithick's new invention of a steam locomotive successfully pulled 10 tons of iron and 70 men from Penydarren in Merthyr to Abercynnon in the neighbouring borough of Rhondda Cynon Taf, some 10 miles away. The rise of the railways would greatly increase the need for coal and iron, and by the peak of the Revolution, the districts of Merthyr housed 4 of the greatest ironworks in the world, being those of Dowlas, Plymouth, Cyfarthfa and Penydarren. The working conditions within these industries were far from pleasant, and in 1850, after visiting the area, the Scottish writer Thomas Carlyle wrote that the town was filled with such unguided, hard-worked, fierce and miserable-looking sons of Adam I never saw before. It is like a vision of hell, and will never leave me, that of these poor creatures broiling, all in their sweat and dirt, amid their furnaces, pits and rolling mills. Just 6 short years later, some 380 miles away in Lanarkshire, Scotland, a man would be born who would later take these people to his heart and fight for their rights to live and work safely and in peace, even if it cost him his life. That man was James Kier Hardie. Born James Kier to a farm servant mother and absent father, he would take the surname of his stepfather, David Hardie, who married Kier's mother in 1859. From this moment on, he would become known as Keir Hardie. Hardie's childhood was far from easy, as the family struggled to survive. On the same day his stepfather left to work at sea, 10-year-old Hardie started work in the pits of the Monkland Iron Company for £1 a day. For 6 days a week, he would work from 6 a.m. to 5:30 p.m, with 4 extra hours on a Sunday. This time did not include his 3-mile walk to and from the pit, and as a result, Hardie would almost never see the sun during the winter. 2 years would pass with Hardie working down the pit, and with many pit owners cutting costs by ignoring legal safety standards, before long Hardie was involved in a pit accident and would find himself, along with numerous other miners, almost buried alive at pit bottom. The pit shaft, which provided the only entrance and exit, had begun to collapse. With the cage stuck in the shaft, Hardie and the trapped miners could do nothing but wait in the darkness for help from the surface. All of the men were eventually rescued from the pit, and there is no doubt that this incident would forever stay with Hardie and create a bond between himself and the working men of the coal mines. By his early 20s, Hardie had educated himself more than most miners, had a keen interest in politics, and was a trade union official. But it was the premature death of his daughter and the death of many of his personal friends in a colliery accident in 1887 that spurred Hardie into action. Standing in 1888 mid-Lanark by-election as an independent Labour candidate, Hardie finished last with just 617 of the votes, while the Liberals won easy with 3,847. However, the election had focused national attention on Hardie, and he addressed his voters with the words, "Your vote marks a turning point in history. Perfect your organisation, educate your fellows, look to the register, spread the light, and the future is yours." By 1892, Hardie's views were so well known that he had formed the Scottish Labour Party and was asked to stand for the London constituency of West Ham South against the Conservative and Liberal candidates. Fortunately for Hardie, at the start of the year, a tragedy removed the Liberal candidate outright. With the Liberals in disarray, no replacement was found, and the majority backed Hardie. At the age of 36, the one-time pit boy secured 5,268 votes against the Conservatives' 4,036. Hardie was now an MP. Hardie instantly made a name for himself in Parliament, opting to wear a tweed suit instead of the traditional frock coat and top hat worn by other members. He had previously stated that he had been returned by working men as a Labour member, and he intended to go to the House of Commons in that capacity. However, it was an incident on the 23rd of June 1894 that spurred Hardie to write a damning article in his paper, The Labour Leader, and to bring Parliament and the media against him. A colliery disaster at Kilfynydd, South Wales, had claimed the lives of over 250 men and boys. On the same day, the Duchess of York had given birth to a son, and the next day, President Carnot was assassinated in France. When Parliament passed a vote of condolence with the French people, Hardie asked if it could be extended to the people of South Wales, and was simply brushed aside. When the next motion was to congratulate the Duke and Duchess of York, Hardie was on his feet with a fiery speech that brought chaos to Parliament. The press made him a hate figure, but to the Independent Labour Party and the working classes, he was a hero. Hardie would lose his West Ham South seat, but his passion for the miners of South Wales had created an Independent Labour Party presence, and Hardie himself had been established. So much so that in 1900, Hardie found himself elected as one of the dual members for the constituency of Merthyr Tydfil and Aberdare. Once again, Hardie was quick to voice his opinion in the Commons, this time condemning the Boer War. He opposed a large pension for a Boer War commander, and asked what was available for the private soldiers coming back wounded. The reply of "the workhouse," shouted by some Conservative members, only fueled Hardie's resolve for change. He began to pull together various trade unions and socialist groups, who agreed to form a Labour Socialist Committee, which would become known as the Labour Party, with Hardie being elected as its first leader. Over the next decade, Hardie campaigned relentlessly for the working class, and even supported women's suffrage, thanks to his friendship with suffragettes Emmeline and Sylvia Pankhurst. However, this period was also fraught with illness, and the loss of both his mother and stepfather within hours of each other took his toll on Hardie, and he began to look much older than his age. He would step down as Labour leader in 1908, opting for a world tour to regain his health. Having retained his seat in Merthyr in 1906, Hardie went into the election of 1910 better prepared than on previous occasions, not only gaining support from the unions, but the many church leaders that were scattered around the borough. The Christian vote, with its growing emphasis on social reform, was an important part of Hardie's support, and allowed him to retain his seat once again. At the end of July 1914, World War was about to break out. Hardie had long foreseen a coming war and feared that Britain would be drawn in. He detected that private companies saw war as a way of making money, not only in weapon manufacture, but also horses, uniforms, and vehicles. But it fell on deaf ears. On the 4th of August 1914, Britain honoured its treaties with France and Russia and declared war. To Hardie's dismay, the majority of the general public, including the working classes, supported the war. Even in his own constituency, during a meeting at Aberdare, Hardie was jeered, shouted down, and his voice drowned out under Rule Britannia and God Save the King. It would be the start of constant abuse in the streets, railway carriages, and in the press across the country. Devastated by the war and insults, even from the classes he had worked so hard to support, Hardie suffered a mild stroke in January 1915. Despite being clearly ill, Hardie refused to rest and continued to denounce the war. It would cost him his life, falling victim to pneumonia in hospital and dying on the 26th of September 1915. He was 59. Honoured by family and the working class, no representatives from other political parties attended his funeral, and not a single word was said in tribute to him in the House of Commons. Most newspapers disliked Hardie, and this was reflected in those which bothered to print an obituary. Just a few months later, the men who had branded Hardie a traitor or a coward would find their own values questioned when the government introduced national conscription, forcing most men between the age of 18 and 41 to join the war effort. For those who objected and shared the views of the late Keir Hardie, thousands would find themselves court-martialed, imprisoned, or even pay with their lives. When Hardie died, thousands were being killed every day, yet he constantly foresaw better days. He was a politician who never forgot where he came from, and who campaigned for a better life for the thousands of working-class people who simply deserved better. As Sylvia Pankhurst was to describe him many years later, Keir Hardie has been the greatest human being of our time. When the dust raised by opposition to the pioneer has settled, this will be known by all.